Yesterday, the U.S. imposed two different types of sanctions on two leaders of the Sudan paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. The RSF is an independent military force in Sudan responsible for war crimes and human rights abuses. Washington sanctioned General Abdel Harim Dagalo and his brother Mohamed Dagalo. At the same time, visa restrictions were imposed on the commander of the Rapid Support Forces in West Darfur. For more on this conversation, we're now joined by Akshaya Kumar, a crisis advocacy director at Human Rights Watch. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Akshaya. What was your immediate reaction to the sanctions imposed on these leaders?
Well, I think many of us who've been following Sudan for years breathed a sigh of relief. This has been a long time coming, especially Abdul Rahim Dagalo, Mohamed Hamdan Hemeti's brother. This is a man who has been acting with impunity and without consequences for a long time.
How effective do you believe these sanctions will be? Do you think these will add in any way in them ending the atrocities that you make mention that they have imposed on the people of Sudan?
Well, sanctions are a tool for pressure and leverage, and they're a way to show the world is watching, the world is aware of what's happening to the people of Sudan and the people of Darfur in particular. And I think in that way, the sanctions are already effective because these men now know their actions will not continue without consequence, that their actions are being scrutinized. But if you were to ask me in particular about their assets, where they are, how they will be seized, that remains to be seen. And in large part, it requires multinational cooperation, which is why we need to see similar efforts from across the world and the UN.
Just in the interest of our viewers, Akshaya, what do these sanctions entail?
Well, there were two different kinds of sanctions which were imposed. One is a travel ban, so that prevents the individual from coming into the U.S. That may not be as impactful unless they plan to travel. But the other are financial sanctions, and so that freezes assets and potentially also affects these individuals' ability to do transactions in any business that requires dollars.
These are the first sanctions on individuals in Sudan. I mean, previously we've seen sanctions on companies and corporates, but this being on individuals, what precedents do you believe this is going to set?
Well, it's interesting about Sudan because, of course, 20 years ago, there was a very similar crisis. There was allegations of ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and lots of sanctions were imposed, including by the U.S. government. So in that way, these aren't the first sanctions on Sudanese, but they are the first sanctions after this round of fighting since April. And so I think that's quite important because it shows that in some ways the international community, observers in Washington, are now looking at the crisis with the same kind of concern they had when Colin Powell declared the situation was a genocide so many years ago.
Do you believe, Akshaya, in any way there's an end in sight when it comes to this war in Sudan?
In Sudan, the biggest piece of the puzzle that's missing is the warring parties listening to civilians, international actors listening to civilians. Civilians, all walks of Sudanese women especially, were the ones who led the revolution that ousted Omar al-Bashir. They were the ones who pushed for change, and now they've been marginalized. Until they're brought to the table, I worry we'll see more of the same.
So with that said, Akshaya, and with these sanctions being imposed, really do you feel that the effectiveness of these sanctions will be felt by those that need to feel it, or will they just continue, as you say, ignoring the pleas and the plights of the people of Sudan?
I think a lot depends on how the sanctions are enforced. If they are complemented by actions from the UK, maybe from other neighbors in the region, and also if they're the signal of more to come, if they're the signal of greater scrutiny, perhaps resolutions being passed at the Security Council or the European Union, perhaps even action from the African Union in Addis Ababa. If these sanctions signal turning a page and shifting into a new gear, then we might see a change in behavior. But if they're just a single action isolated then I think we and the people of Sudan will be left waiting for more.
Certainly the people of Sudan do deserve for action to be taken against these people that are putting these atrocities onto them. Akshaya, thank you so much for your time this evening and for joining us and for your insights. That was Akshaya Kumar, Director of Crisis Advocacy at Human Rights Watch.